What's happening, everyone? Welcome to the Paranormies present the Ahnenerbe Hour. I am Johnny Monoxide, and tonight I'm joined by a sleepy Scott Taylor. What's up, Scott?
Hello.
Hey, we got Mr. Adam Haight. What's up, Adam?
Hello.
And joining us once again from the Right Stuff.biz's own and Identity Dixie's own Rebel Yell, Mr. Musonius Rufus. What up, dude?
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Oh, man, always a pleasure to have you back and your vast encyclopedia of knowledge on just about everything. Yeah. How's everybody doing? Scott, you're gonna be there, right, the whole time? You're not gonna die on us tonight?
I'll be here. No, I'm fine.
Scott's a test subject. He's been doing see, Scott's been a little financially behind, so what he did is he saw one of those things stapled to a telephone pole about doing medical experiments and getting paid for them.
All my money is tied up in Bitcoin. I can't access it.
All right, here we go. We got a coin reference in within the first 30 seconds, and I didn't do it. So this is awesome. I did a couple other shows this week. I did Hate House with Larry Ridgway and J.O. Delaray. We did that last night, and we started talking about coins right off the bat. And I did the Southern AF podcast with the Southern Dingo, and he talked about coins, and we talked about coins a lot because there's nothing worse, I believe, than a no coiner.
They're really pathetic. I mean, how do they even live with themselves?
I mean,
Yeah. Worst people I've ever met.
Adam, we're gonna hook you up, dude. Seriously, like we can turn you into a Lambo driving
car battery.
Yeah, seriously.
If you don't buy some coin.
Seriously, dude, we can hook you up. Hook you up with a Lamborghini within like 2 weeks.
I already donated all my money to Lawrence Southern.
I did too. What do you think I invested in Bitcoin?
That's right.
I need more money to donate to her.
Musonius, you're a coiner, right? You're involved in crypto, correct?
Yeah, that's how I bought this microphone. So
awesome. Look at that. These people, these no coiners that are like, oh, you guys, it's not even real money. You can't do anything with it. Listen, he is talking to you live.
First of all, no money is real money. It's all bullshit.
Now, Adam, see this sound. This is a salty no coiner speaking, obviously. So salty. Bitcoin. Bitcoin. Dude, seriously, like, we got guys. No, listen, check it out, dude. We got guys. We've got our little crypto group going on Facebook, and we got guys that started off with literally $20. And they are now.
And now they're billionaires.
You're not wrong. I mean,
they're
but
all
no,
billionaire. No, that's true.
It's true. Every single one of us is a billionaire. The only reason we're still doing this show is because we care about you, the fan. And because we want to call everybody salty no coiners. But there's nothing better than mining the salt out of like a Facebook like Let's Argue. The no coiners and Let's Argue are the best. Like that's premium, like pink Himalayan salt to be mined.
I'm buying coins as we speak.
Are you? What do you you're on Binance. What are you investing in? Don't do Verge. Don't do Verge again. Don't do Verge again. It's not gonna. It's a meme.
It's going down, dude. It's at 9.15. I'm looking at it. It's almost at the lowest in the last 24 hours, dude. It's fine.
I know. Okay. All right. But the
Paranormies presents the Jewish Hour.
That's right.
We're doing a little shift in subject matter. We're talking about Bitcoin now.
That's right. That's all we do is talk about Bitcoin. It's literally all I talk about is Bitcoin. I've lost my last 2 IRL friends because they're no coiners. And no, I'm just kidding. But seriously, you guys should get on it. All right. Enough about that. It is, hey, Happy New Year, boys. It's officially 2018.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
How about that?
Yeah, it's the current year plus 4. So
is it plus 4 or I thought it was plus 3?
Midnight.
I thought it was 20,
plus 3 sounds better.
It was 2015 was the original John Oliver's current year. You didn't stay up till midnight. Scott said he wasn't gonna, but then what happened? You started reading some blog and ended up staying up anyway.
Yeah, I was like, I don't really care. And then I look at the clock and it's like 12:20. I'm like, oh shit. I didn't even like watch it roll over or anything.
Oh man. Well, you guys want to? Did you guys have any New Year's resolutions?
Well, actually, this is a
Just
pretty good topic for New Year's resolutions, isn't it? Yeah, because we're going to be talking about metabolism, diet, that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. So what's your New Year's resolution?
Well, I think I'll go on the ketogenic diet with Scott here. He's way ahead of me, though. How many days are you into it, Scott?
I'm 3 days into it,
and he's got the keto flu.
I'm exhausted. I feel like shit.
Yeah, but it's like the diet intervention basically you can do, right?
No. Yeah, no, I mean, eventually, I guess we can talk about it more as the show goes on, but I'm eating, my goal is to eat nothing but meat for the month of January, and then we'll see how things go from there.
So you're doing the Eskimo or
I'm doing zero carb. There's a Facebook group I found called Zeroing In on Health. And
all right, add me.
Yeah. Okay. I'll add you right now. Okay. But yeah, it's nothing but meat. It's zero carb.
Yeah, I read that article that you posted about the was it a Brit or something that went to like northern Canada and hung out with the
Eskimos,
the Inuits, whatever they are up there, and he went on that all fish, it was like literally fish and water diet, and and they basically debunked the scurvy myth about go ahead.
Yeah, that's one of the confusing things about being in ketosis is that you just don't need vitamin C like you used to, and they don't know exactly why. But not only do you get vitamin C from animal products, but you don't need the amounts that you used to.
Well,
it's sort of like
the theory is
go on, Scott.
Vitamin C and glucose basically take up the same pathways in your liver, I think it is. So if you're on a mixed diet of carbohydrates and fats, where you're getting your energy from both, you need a lot more vitamin C to compensate because you're basically not very sensitive to it. Whereas if you're on a carnivore diet, you can get the trace amounts of vitamin C that are in meat are enough for your body to survive off of.
Mm-hmm. That sounds plausible. Yeah, there's several counterintuitive things about going into this diet, but Brits that went up to find the Northwest Passage or to find ships that were frozen and stranded up there looking for the Northwest Passage, or Arctic explorers. There's been a bunch of Europeans in the past 150 years that went up there, and the scientists were literally telling them they would die if they didn't eat carbohydrates, and they switched over to the Eskimo diet, and they got their strength back after doing it, and they were able to live like an Eskimo, and they were fine. Stephenson actually came back, and they had published his obituary in the New York Times and said he was dead. And when he came back, he said, "Yeah, I've been up in the Arctic Circle for 2 years. I came back because I was running low on ammo. I only had 10 rounds left in my rifle." They just called him a liar. They called him a liar.
Well, he actually did. I guess we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but he did an experiment with was it Bellevue Hospital?
Yeah, in New York.
Yeah.
Yep.
He locked himself in the hospital, him and one of his explorer friends, and basically had them run all sorts of dietary experiments on him, and they lived off of meat and nothing else for a year and were totally fine.
Well, Bellevue is basically, isn't it a mental institution in New York?
I think it is, but yeah, I guess that's where they were.
Yeah, Bellevue was a metabolic ward back then, and so they could keep track mathematically exactly what he was eating, and they wouldn't let him out of their sight. I mean, he had attendants that would follow him when he went to Central Park to exercise, and he liked racing people to show that he wasn't suffering on this diet, that he could literally outrace them.
So the ketogenic diet is what we're talking about here. This is basically low to no carb. But isn't there in the keto diet, now correct me if I'm wrong, there's supposed to be a high amount of fat and only a moderate amount of protein?
No, you're right. But go ahead, Scott.
That's true. By calories, you're going to get most of your calories from fat, something like, I want to say 60 to 70%, and then the rest will be from protein. The one thing I should say is a low carb diet is supposedly different than a no carb diet. I'm not really sure exactly how they're different, but there is supposedly a difference between having, ketosis where you're eating, say, 15 grams of carbs a day versus, eating 0 carbs because there's no carbohydrates in animal products, essentially.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, there's a little glycogen or something, trace amounts that don't add up to anything. When you eat skeletal muscle. But the under 50 grams is what you got to, of carbs per day is what you got to have to do low carb. And there's several of these diets. Most people are acquainted with Atkins back in the 90s. Atkins ran like a New York clinic for weight loss since the 60s, and he did the opposite of what everyone, was doing back then. Everyone was switching to low fat, high carbs to replace the fat. And Atkins had a lot of success going, low carb. And in the 90s, we had, the breakthrough, and that was the low carb revolution. Well, now you got paleo, you got keto. Each one has a slightly different philosophy, but all of them, believe in getting rid of refined carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say the keto. The Atkins diet was the one that first popularized, like you said, the low carb diet, where it was basically just put bacon on everything. You just eat pounds of bacon. That was when the bacon craze first started and turned bacon in to the #1 sold meat in the United States. I remember when the Atkins diet became really popular in the late 90s, early 2000s. When I was in the Navy, a bunch of the guys were doing that. And the reason being, like you said, that most of America was going on this low-fat diet. And what they realized was we had the highest population in the world on a low-fat diet that was obese. So you have the amount, the amount of the population that was actually obese that was actually on a low-fat diet. They were drinking diet sodas, eating low-fat, cheese, low-fat this, low-fat that, and they were fat. And Dr. Atkins realized that wasn't right, and he got into to change it around, where fat is what you basically your body converts fat as energy as opposed to glucose from carbohydrates.
Oh yeah, there's a huge story here, but basically the story begins in the 1800s with Banting. That was the first diet, the Banting diet. And, it ends with metabolic syndrome and all the diseases that modern Westerners die from. They die from heart disease, cancer, diabetes, hypertension. And then they have lesser diseases like irritable bowel syndrome. It may not kill you, but you wish you were dead. And, so the story, if you want to start the diet story, it starts all the way back in the 1860s. But, we are going to talk about cancer, right? We're going to talk about cancer and heart disease. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, in the 1860s, there was a undertaker named William Banting, and he was really overweight. Now, if you go back to the 1800s or the 18th century, there were plenty of fat people, but were still pretty stout, and they weren't debilitated, from their being overweight. In the 19th century, that's when Europeans started really being overweight, or you started getting the first morbidly obese people. And he had to go down his steps backwards because it hurt his knees so bad. And he tried the diet advice, which was basically the first diet advice he received was, well, because fat has 9 calories per gram. They used different measurements, before the metric system, really took off in the Anglosphere. But, fat is 9 calories per gram, and carbs and protein are each 4 calories per gram. So it would make sense to fill up on carbs and, protein and, get vegetables for your vitamins. The first vitamins were synthesized from fruits and vegetables. And then that way you'll lose weight because your total amount of calories will come down. So it has a very simple physical model, calories in, calories out. Right. Right. He tried those diets, because that was the first, they were like physical equation diets. The idea is you put energy in, you have too much energy, you need to burn more. So he took up rowing because it was good on his knees, it wouldn't hurt his legs. And he started eating high carbs and low fat. It wasn't working. And so finally a doctor gave him the opposite advice. He tried it out and it worked. And that was the first diet in the West, was a low carb, high fat, high protein diet. And it did have a lot of protein. We'll talk about keto being low protein later, and that's when your grandmother, if you're, as old as I am, my grandmother would tell me that sugar was fattening, bread was fattening, that was what was fattening, and then my mother's generation, like the boomers, they were told a bunch of nonsense starting in the 1950s, and they believe that fat is fattening.
Well, that's when they discovered the food pyramid. And the food pyramid basically flipped around on its head, like the correct diet for you. That was. I mean, there's a lot to the reasons behind the food pyramid. Number one, subsidies. You're supposed to eat 12 servings of carbs a day, or bread, or how many ever it was, I don't remember. But there's the pyramid: carbs on the bottom, then vegetables, and then meats, and then fats on the top. When the reality is, it should be flipped the other way around. But yeah, I remember that same thing. My grandmother's generation was no breads, no sugars. And, we ate a lot, when we went to my grandmother's house. The only everybody thinks Italians, they eat a lot of pasta, a lot of breads. I think that's like boomer generation, to be honest with you. My grandmother, we never really had a lot of bread at her house. If we had, we had pasta, but like we didn't have like that. It wasn't like, your typical, what you picture like an Italian dinner now, where it's like all pasta with, like 2 meatballs on the side and a big thing of bread. And like, no, it was, there was more fish, and there was chicken and veal, and more meats and cheese, and a lot less pasta. Pasta was like a side dish almost. We didn't. And then my mom's generation is where they started getting into the weird, the low fats, and diet foods started coming out, and you had they went on that weird thing with eggs, where one week eggs were bad for you, and another week, well, no, just the yolks are bad for you, and then another week it was like, no. Yeah, you remember that? You guys
they cause diabetes. Yeah,
they cause
diabetes, I remember that.
Yeah, and now it's like, no, eat as many eggs. Now it's like, eat as many eggs as possible. And it's like, and I eat a lot of eggs now, because they're cheap.
Butter was the same way.
Mm-hmm. And now it's, now you like the butter diet now, There's a guy's
they
website.
Replace it with margarine.
Yeah.
I mean, which is a whole nother story.
It's like,
that was done because of the Great War.
Yeah.
Yeah, they wanted to get the butter to the troops, so they invented a substitute butter. And then later it had good profit margins, so they really tried pushing it to replace all butter.
Profit margarines.
Margarines. Well, I mean, I guess the next phase of the story is the 1920s. Now, they synthesized all the vitamins, the essential vitamins. There's like 30 of them. You got water-soluble vitamins, you got fat-soluble vitamins, and you got minerals, right? They synthesized all these vitamins in around World War I, between 1915 and 1925. And that's where the whole theory that you got to eat vegetables to get vitamins comes from, because they all synthesized them from vegetables sources. The Arctic explorers, because the 1920s were a great decade of exploration, that's when they got a lot of pushback. They said, well, I just ate whale blubber and seal blubber and fish, scurvy, and they said, well, that's impossible. I think we started out talking about Stephenson, a famous Arctic explorer, and how he spent a year in a metabolic ward to prove that he wasn't a liar. You just got to know what to eat.
Right.
The diet. In the 1920s, the greatest biochemist of the 20th century, Otto Warburg, concentrating on cancer. Third Reich's, great biochemist. He was a Michelin, interestingly enough. He had fought in the Great War, and he was a patriot, and he had been decorated. But, he could have died, and we would have lost, the greatest biochemist of the 20th century. Einstein wrote him a letter like, please stop fighting in that war, but he was a patriot. So the Nazis left him alone. And Hitler was scared to death of cancer. And starting in 1926, Otto Warburg, he started really concentrating on, what causes cancer. And this is way back before they understood mitochondria, before they had the spiral structure of DNA understood.
I think they called it a grana. They called mitochondria grana because they could observe it, but they didn't know what it was.
Literally grains. Yeah, grana. You're exactly right. And what he noticed was that cancer cells ferment. We are oxygen-breathing multicellular life forms. We breathe oxygen, and we have basically these little coal plants called mitochondria in our cells that are used. The cycle goes through the mitochondria, and it uses oxygen, to burn either glucose or to burn ketone bodies to provide energy. Well, when you are overstressing the cell, like when you're lifting weights or something, that burn is lactic acid building up in your cells. And what's happening is your cells like, oh, I'm going to die because I'm not getting enough energy. So it starts short-circuiting the cycle of energy in your cell, and fermentation starts taking place outside of the mitochondria in the cell. And then what cancer is an immortal form of cell that is no longer differentiated into tissue, and all its mitochondria are screwed up. And you have all these different kinds of cancer depending upon what tissue they originally were, and they all have different oncogenes. Onco is just the Greek word for cancer. So it sounds less profound when you start talking about cancer genes. That's all oncogenes means, right? And anyway, the original theory of cancer, it was just too much cell growth. That's all cancer is. They didn't understand that it was differentiated.
It's kind of true, but yeah.
That's one of the aspects. They got one of the aspects right, and they didn't understand the other aspects. Anyway, Otto Warburg, and it's named after him, the Warburg effect. He noticed that all their respiration is screwed up and their mitochondria are screwed up, or the grana are messed up, is what he called them, and they're forming lactic acid. They are fermenting, just like a bottle of wine ferments. And you know how to kill off fermentation. Unpop that cork and let oxygen in. It'll kill off the yeast. It'll stop the fermentation process.
Yeah, or you can just remove the fuel, but we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Well, now we're getting to the actual. Now we're getting into our actual subject tonight. Tonight's subject wasn't diets and whether or not whale blubber is good for you. Tonight we're going to talk. Tonight we're talking about metabolic cancer and other diseases that are not misdiagnosed but mistreated for sure.
Yeah. That I'm trying to get into it as quickly as possible. I hope I'm making sense. But
you are. No, definitely.
The modern.
I'm just saying, take your time. We got.
Basically,
we got plenty of time.
The idea is, it's not a genetic disease, it's a metabolic disease. Cancer is a metabolic issue, not a genetic issue.
Right. The disorder is in the cytoplasm, not in the nucleus.
Right.
That's the key. That's the key to understanding the metabolic theory of cancer. See, and Warburg had this all figured out. At least, not the exact mechanism, because he didn't have electron microscopes or anything like that back then. But he had the basic idea right. He's like, that's the one thing that all these cancers have in common. Each kind of cancer cell.
I got his quote here.
Yeah, give it to us.
Just as there are many remote causes of plague, heat, insects, rats, but only one common cause, the plague bacillus, there are a great many remote causes of cancer: tar, rays, I think he means radiation here, arsenic, pressure, urethane, whatever that is. But there's only one common cause into which all other causes of cancer merge: the irreversible injuring of respiration.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Respiration is the fire. It's like fire. It breathes. It produces heat. That's how we're supposed to be making energy in our cells. Fermentation's like rot. It's producing this acidic oxidative byproduct. And he basically nailed it. That's what cancer is. What happens, and this is the metabolic theory of cancer, is that your mitochondria are burning glucose their whole life, and they're not really designed to do that. They're designed to burn ketone bodies, at least half the time, at the very least. And modern diets don't allow you to do that. And so glucose is like brown coal. It's very dirty fuel, and it produces a lot of ROS, radical oxidative species. These species are messing up the cristae and the mitochondria. They're destroying the engine, right? It's like an engine, and it's destroying the engine. And so the cell goes into emergency mode, where it's like, we're not getting enough energy. We got to do fermentation. So it starts doing fermentation, and then it sends a signal to the nucleus, and the nucleus starts flipping on oncogenes, or getting the cell ready to do more fermentation. And it's actually becoming more primitive. The original form of life on Earth is a fermenting anaerobic form of life. In fact, it's still around. It's at the bottom of swamps. It's at the bottom of the ocean. It's down in the mines producing these cyanide compounds and H2S and all sorts of stuff that's nasty to us.
Yeah, and it developed when there was not an oxygen-rich environment. That's why they don't need oxygen.
Right, and geologists, that's why they call oxygen, or the paleontologists are like, the oxygen catastrophe. When photosynthesis occurred, it started producing oxygen, which was a nasty byproduct. And, that's when mitochondria, originally were bacteria that were respirating.
Wasn't that one of the biggest die-offs in history as far as like the amount of life goes? Is when oxygen first showed up?
I'd say it would be a big die-off, but see, here's the thing: it's like there's not going to be hard animal parts they're going to fossilize, right? Before the Cambrian explosion, that's when the Cambrian explosion is where animals start getting hard body parts to defend themselves from predation, and that's when we first see them in the record. Right, the fossil record. Before that, they were Ediacaran, and all you get to see are like worm tracks, like in the mud. There's some of those in Australia. But soft-bodied animals. Well, these are already multicellular animals. Multicellular life really took off after the oxygen catastrophe.
Yeah, then they started integrating mitochondria,
right?
Like mammals.
Right, bacteria that was originally anaerobic, probably ate one of these respirating little mitochondria bacterias, and instead of the mitochondria dying, there was a symbiosis that took place. And that's why the mitochondria has DNA, other thing besides the nucleus that has DNA in the cell, because it was its own organism, at one time.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get too far afield here, but, basically the metabolic theory is you guys are now chasing after all those oncogenes because you believe that radicals, radical oxygen, metal ions, radiation neutrons, something, made a hole in that DNA in the nucleus, and so the cells.
I think part of the reason that happened is right after, right about the time that Otto Warburg was making these observations. A little bit after that, Watson and Crick discovered the structure of DNA, and which caused a sort of a revolution in biology research. At that point, everybody shifted their focus to DNA research, and this became the big new thing. And that combined with the fact that Otto Warburg was in Germany during World War II and he didn't really care about fighting the Nazis, it got him smeared in the scientific community, which we all know is run by Jews. It goes back to Albert Einstein. And I'm not even joking. I think this is part of the reason that they ridiculed him and smeared him and tried to sort of eliminate his legacy. Because this guy was a Nobel Prize winning scientist, but he didn't toe the line the way that they wanted to, and combined with the DNA revolution sort of pushed all his research away.
Yeah, the Germans were the best biologists, and what happened was when they were destroyed, when the Third Reich was destroyed, the Anglosphere and the Soviets all wanted weapons technology. They didn't give a fig for all the biology, but all the best biology was being done by Germans, and the best biochemistry was. And so they wanted the rockets, and they wanted the bomb, anything having to do with weapons. But they didn't care about biology. Ed Watson and Crick, Anglosphere, they figured out DNA. But DNA has not been useful until the modern period, until, basically recently in the past, 3 decades. Because it's like a black box. Yeah, it's a black box. It's too complicated. There are 10 million oncogenes that the Cancer Atlas back in 2006 identified, right? And the paradox that the metabolic theory solves is the oncogenic paradox of cancer. How is it that all these different things can cause the same disease? Because the DNA is all different. How can you, when you look at the oncogenes in a cancer cell, like each kind of tissue oncogenes, and then the same tumors, like pancreatic cancer, will have different oncogenes. So
now let me sorry to interrupt. Let me just real quick make the point. We're also not saying that carcinogens, like radiation and stuff, can't also contribute. Anything that can damage DNA, it doesn't have to be diet that damages the mitochondria. If the mitochondria was damaged by radiation or whatever else, it could also lead to the same metabolic problem.
Yeah,
right?
well, the oncogenic paradox is that cancer is caused by all these different things. It's caused by smoking. It's caused by staying out in the sun too much. It's caused by molecular poisons. It's caused by oxidative stress on the cell. It is caused by all these different things. But if the mechanism was that they're all attacking the nuclear DNA, you would end up with apoptosis, dead cells everywhere, right?
Well, how about this? Why don't they take a tumor nucleus and put it into a healthy cell? It should make tumors, right?
They did do that in the 1980s.
I was gonna say they did. Yeah, they did do that, and it didn't work.
Yeah, exactly. It's the nuclear transfer experiments of the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
See, they were locked into the genetic theory of cancer in 1976. And after that, everything's been the genetic theory of cancer. In the 1980s, they did these experiments of nuclear transfer. And what they found out was you put a tumor nucleus in a healthy cell, that healthy cell goes on being healthy. It does not send all these signals to the cytoplasm to become cancer. However, if you do the reverse, if you put a healthy nucleus in a cancer cell, it becomes cancer. So that means the cytoplasm is telling the nucleus what to do, not the other way around. And that is the key. That is the key reversal here that you got to understand with metabolic theory of cancer. The cytoplasm is pushing around the nucleus and telling it what to do. The oncogenes are just a way for are more primitive genes that are being turned on so that the cell can be better at fermentation, because it has to do fermentation to live now. Why? The mitochondria are messed up. How did they get messed up? Some radical attacked it. About radicals here, we're talking about radical ROS, radical oxidative species, or molecular poisons like metal ions, or radiation like neutrons, or you got too much nicotine in the electron transport chain, whatever. These are poisons that are messing up respiration.
There's another interesting set of experiments they did in the 80s where they took tumor cells from mice and they used the nucleus from the tumor cells to clone the mice. And they weren't able to fully develop it. There was some issue at some point where the embryos would just terminate. They would just abort. So they weren't able to get a full clone from it, but they were able to get to various stages in development.
That weren't tumors, right? What happened was, once the cell goes into fermentation, you have a scale, right? Some cells can be saved, right? Because not enough oxidative damage has happened to the cell can be saved. But some cells can never be saved, right? And so what happened to those nucleuses or nuclei was that being in the cancer cell was eventually causing more and more damage to the DNA. It's to where it can't go back to normal. It has a way of dealing with cancer. The ketogenic diet is the only intervention I've ever heard of that can cause redifferentiation of cancer tissue. That means tissue that was cancer becomes normal, healthy tissue again. Meanwhile, the tissue that's too far gone, it gets marginalized. It gets pushed to the outside of the organ so that you can use traditional cancer therapies like cut, poison, burn, which is like chemo, surgery, radiation. That's what, cut, poison, burn is the abbreviation, I use for that. So, that's literally what's happening with those nuclear transfer experiments. You're right. The cell did not become cancer. It tried to become a mouse embryo, and it went to a certain stage, and then it stopped because the nucleus was somewhat damaged from its experience as being cancer.
Now, when you're talking about the ketogenic diet, I think we should probably go into why that is so successful in starving these cancer cells. So.
Oh, yeah, that's great, Scott. Yeah, the ketogenic diet was invented in the 1920s for intractable seizures. Back then they did not have a lot of drugs for epileptics, and they found out the ketogenic diet it works great for killing off seizures. But around the 50s or 60s, they started inventing drugs for epileptics, and so the ketogenic diet went by the wayside. And but there were still people like kids that had intractable seizures, which means that it doesn't respond to drugs. So parents had to pick up the ketogenic diet back out of the waste bin and implement it, and it stops the seizures. And if the children eat carbs, they have a breakthrough seizure where they go back to having seizures, right? Well, the epileptics have kept up the ketogenic diet since its disuse in the 1960s with the advent of all these drugs. The ketogenic diet, the reason why it's called ketogenic is because when you're not burning glucose, which is basically sugar, you get it from carbohydrate. It is a carbohydrate, right? When you're not burning that, the mitochondria can also burn fat bodies, which are ketone bodies. Right, and they have like big long names, so we just call them ketone bodies. And the mitochondria can burn them just fine. In fact, they're clean burning. They produce pyruvate. They don't have ROS, radical oxidative species, so it actually is good for the cell to burn this because it's clean fuel.
Oh, and just for the record, a radical is just an unpaired electron. and it's very eager to repair, and so it can be rather destructive when it is, reacting with various things that are around it. It's very reactive, and it can cause damage to things as it's really trying to pair up with another electron.
Yeah, oxygen is really bad for producing radicals because, H2O, both the electrons are satisfied with hydrogen, right? They're saturated. But oxygen still has it's got another two hanging off the back that are not very comfortable.
But they do okay.
The HO, like if you only have one bond to that oxygen, the oxygen is liable to jump off. And there's plenty of substances like hydrogen peroxide, chlorine, bleach, ozone, where you see unhappy oxygen that's ready to jump off and bond to something. And those are all ways of bleaching things. That's where bleach comes from. Well, oxygen wants to form new compounds. It wants to jump off its present molecule. Well, on the cellular level, when you're burning glucose, you're producing these radical oxygen and oxidative species that have these radical oxygens on them that want to bond to stuff. Well, if they bond to the cristae and the mitochondria, they screw it up, and eventually the mitochondria can't work anymore. The basic metabolic theory in a nutshell. What's interesting is going back to the ketogenic diet, is that, ketogenic diets, we've already covered that they work for epilepsy. Well, the Department of Defense, a little known secret about Navy SEALs, they use rebreathers, right? You know what a rebreather is? It's scuba gear that doesn't produce bubbles, right? Because it's literally scrubbing CO2 out of the oxygen, right? So of gaseous bubbles pouring out of the system, and it's a closed system. Well, it produces so much oxygen that can hyper-excite the brain. People underwater on rebreathers have a tendency to have seizures. Well, the DOD hates this, because there's all sorts of operators using rebreathers all over the globe, in special ops, and some of them are dying from having seizures underwater. So it's paid a lot of money to investigate the ketogenic diet because they don't want these guys on drugs either, because they're operators. They want their heads to be clear. And so people like Dominique D'Agostino he's getting paid by DARPA to research the ketogenic diet, just for the neuroprotective effects that it has. And so the ketogenic diet is not just for epilepsy; it's neuroprotective generally. It'll protect your brain from having seizures, being too excited from oxygen, and it has a protective effect on cancer. The way the ketogenic diet works on cancer is glucose is what's feeding the fermentation. Wine in grape juice is turning into wine, in a wine bottle, right? The cancer cells are producing lactic acid left and right, and they're living off of that glucose, and it lives off of glutamine. Well, if you get rid of all the carbohydrates, there's no more sugar, there's no more glucose, for the cancer to live off of, so it starts starving. Second 1-2 punch, like the Thomas Seyfried up at Boston College is the pioneer here.
Oh yeah,
and
great dude.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I loved watching his videos, man. Those were great. Plus he's not just like your typical stuffed shirt, stuffy professional doctor or whatever. He uses regular layman's terms, and he says he uses the occasional flowery language. It's pretty cool. I liked it.
Yeah, he's fun to listen to.
He's really
yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting is how everyone gets into this, because no one tells you about the stuff. You have to look for it, right? The way he found it was he was a researcher. He's not an MD. He's a researcher up at Boston College, and he had some rats that had tumors, and he threw some of the tumor rats into another experiment where there were some sort of what was it? It was some sort of something blocker. Anyway, it ended up reducing the tumors, so he started investigating that. And it turns out that it was just like the rats were starving. All right, so he's like, okay, I'm going to look into starvation of cancer. And he went from there, and then he found out the ketogenic diet, which mimics starvation.
Was it
because you're taking all the glucose?
The 3-bromopyruvate? Is that what?
Yeah, that was it.
Oh, yeah. That's another thing that people are doing. See, these cancer cells they're weird. They're not like regular eukaryotic cells. They're covered in these protein transfer portals. I don't know what else to call them. That to get the lactic acid out. They're just covered in these things. So someone got the bright idea of why don't we start attacking, since we know, since we're no longer concentrating on the nucleus, why don't we attack some of the metabolic effects of cancer? Well, if we make this 3BP, it will bond to those transporters, those protein transporters on the cell, and prevent lactic acid from getting out. It'll build up in the cell and kill the cancer. Great. But of course, Big Pharma is having a big patent fight over it, and so there's no trials for it right now.
Well,
but the little trial that they did worked great.
You can't patent it is the problem. It's like trying to patent a water molecule.
Yeah.
It's just a chemical, and you can't patent it. But yeah, it selectively kills cancer cells because it depletes the ATP inside of the cancer cell, but it doesn't touch the healthy cells.
Yeah, like cancer treatments cancer seems indestructible when it has unlimited glucose, and people are always talking about it like it's the Terminator or Jason from Friday the 13th. Like, you can't kill this thing, but it's less metabolically flexible than regular cells. So all the cancer treatments are about causing massive damage to the tissue and then hoping that the regular cells recover quicker because they're more flexible. So they'll use cut, poison, burn, which is like carpet bombing of the tissue, and then that creates a lot of these oxidative species, and the cancer cells can't recover as quick as regular cells. But as Thomas Seyfried's pointed out, there's a whole new branch of medicine for cancer survivors. Done is you've caused a lot of damage that the person's going to have to pay for the rest of their lives, right? With your regular cancer treatments. Mm-hmm. So what he does is he puts people on these strict ketogenic diets, which are reduced caloric. They're not just as much as you want to eat. They're reduced caloric. He starves them of glucose, but he can't starve them of glutamine. Glutamine is the most prevalent amino acid in protein, right? So he uses the press to take away their glucose, and then his pulse is hyperbaric oxygen, oxygen chamber, and just try to kill off that fermentation by putting extra oxygen in their blood. And his methods not only get tissue redifferentiation, the tumors shrink, the tumors start getting pushed to the edge of the brain. I got into this whole thing because I lost someone I cared about to glioblastoma, which is the same thing that John McCain has. So no one tell John McCain about this.
Right.
That's where you all
right. No, we want to keep it. We want to make sure he goes on a low fat, high carb diet.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, isn't it? Now hold on.
The cure for cancer is pixie sticks.
That's right.
Pixie sticks.
Pixie sticks and cocaine, which is basically the same thing. Did you already say, I don't remember if you did or not, but that like how they put cancer patients on keto, like right at the end, like, like even in normal like circumstances, they do eventually, because, they tell these cancer patients that have been on chemo for so long, they've lost all this weight, to go ahead and eat whatever you want, eat all the Doritos you want, eat all of this you want, just, to put weight back on. Right?
That's the standard of care. It's the worst thing that they can do, and they do it.
Yeah. Do we want to get into that later about that and like how?
We could talk about it now, Johnny.
Okay.
We've all lost someone we cared about the cancer, right?
Yeah. You were talking about
you
lost.
Stuff is kind of rustling.
Well, you lost like, somebody.
Damn.
To that blastoma, right? Which is
the guy was like a second father to me.
Okay.
I grew up next to him. He died, in his 40s of glioblastoma, which is a death sentence. I mean, he was literally riding bikes with a surgeon. And, his doctor thought he had Bell's palsy because, like, the side of his face was getting sort of paralyzed. But, Bell's palsy is just like where a virus attacks one side of your face. You get over it real quick. A lot of medical students get it off of cadavers. And but it wasn't getting any better. So the surgeon that he rode with was like, let's do some CAT scans. Let's find out. And then, boom, that butterfly-shaped tumor in the glial cells of the brain, which is a death sentence. He lived 2 years. When most people would only live one, because he was so fit. Just being fit makes you live longer.
Right. Well, how's John McCain doing this? He's been pulling this off for a few years.
Well, I think he just found out he had glioblastoma this year, right? He should be dead by autumn. So.
Well, you forget, all the foreskins that he probably consumes in a day.
Yeah.
There was did you guys see that one
I was gonna say
story I posted about the guy who had brain cancer and actually cured it?
There's a few videos like that. usually they talk about in terms of years, like you were sent home to die in a year, and you're 5 years and counting. Yeah,
Well,
he's
this
5
guy-
years past his. Yeah.
Yeah, well, this guy had it completely recede, I believe. I'm trying to find the name of cancer on his anaplastic astrocytoma was
Yeah,
the
that
one
sounds bad.
Yeah, it was a brain cancer, and I found this blog post from 2015, and then it gave a link to his blog, and I'm like, oh, let's see if he's dead or not, and he's still around, and he did the ketogenic thing.
Yeah, like I hope you all know now that the standard of care is terrible. The standard of care is let's feed these people carby, starchy diets, and let's use cut, poison, burn to cause massive damage and hope that the cancer doesn't recover as quickly as they do. And that is the standard of care.
Well, aren't they feeding these people like Ensure shakes and basically sugar hospital?
Yeah, they're trying to get their weight up. It's like, ironically, the worst food you can eat is in a hospital cafeteria, because it's so starchy. They'll go low fat, high starch. Because they're trying to get people's weight up.
Yeah, I believe it.
There's a lot more to talk about when we talk about these low carb diets, because we haven't talked about heart disease. We haven't talked about hypertension. I mean, the basic, story is that carbohydrates, you only have two teaspoons of sugar in your blood at any one time, because if your blood sugar goes high, it's like poison. It's bad. It kills your eyes. It kills your feet. It kills your tissue. Right. And so, and running low, you feel like shit.
Yes.
That's the paradox of diabetes.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. When you run low, you don't do any damage, but you feel like shit. When you run high, you feel okay, but you're doing all this damage. The blood sugar is what's driving the tune in the metabolic theory of cancer. It's all that glucose in your blood, and your little beta cells on your pancreas are just squirting out insulin left and right, trying to get rid of that blood sugar, trying to get it down. And eventually you get beta cell burnout, where your pancreas just doesn't work anymore and you need to inject insulin. You look at the standard diet for diabetics sometime, it's horrible. They're basically like, they put them on the sugar roller coaster, and then they just give them more and more needles and more insulin to deal with it, curing the problem, which is high blood sugar. Cahill, a scientist named Cahill, did all the best research, research you can't do nowadays. It was like Nazi style research back in the 60s on insulin and blood sugar. Cahill, he took med students that were overweight and said, hey, you want to lose some weight? So he starved them for 40 days and then he injected them with insulin. Should have killed them, right? With what the average person thinks of about blood sugar. And it didn't affect them at all because they were living off of ketones completely by then. So insulin doesn't matter because there's no blood sugar for it to act upon. Right. Insulin is secreted, and it forces all that your blood sugar into becoming triglycerides in your fat cells, right? To get rid of it, get it out. And as long as insulin is present, you will not burn fat. And so that's another reason why the ketogenic diet is limited protein, because carbohydrates are really insulin producing. Protein is a little insulin producing. Fat doesn't produce any insulin at all. They're trying to get you to stop squirting insulin out of your pancreas. So that's why it's limited in protein. I figured I'd throw that out there while we were on the subject of insulin.
As far as, I guess we can get back to diabetes after the break or what too, but it's kind of funny because type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes, even though they kind of end up in the same place, have completely different causes. Type 1 diabetes is, your pancreas cannot produce insulin. It just doesn't know how, which means that you can't ever get your blood sugar down on your own. Whereas type 2 diabetes is caused by insulin resistance.
Insulin resistance, yeah.
You're making so much insulin so long because you never give your fucking body a break because you're always eating carbohydrates, and that's something else I think we should idea that you say. I completely disagree with that because you're never giving your body a break. But regardless, type 2 diabetes comes from resistance because your blood's so full of insulin all the time that your cells basically just get tired of it, and they don't know how to cope with insulin anymore, so they just ignore it basically. And then even though initially having a working pancreas, you end up in the same place as a type 1 diabetic does, where it's as if you had no insulin.
Yeah. Yeah, insulin is the master hormone. It tells a lot of other hormones what to do downstream. And while we're on the subject of hormones, these low-fat diets are terrible for our hormones. Testosterone is made from a fat molecule.
That's right. Yeah. And that's another thing is like we can get into that in the second hour actually, because like this first hour has zipped by. We're coming up right on the end. Is there anything you guys want to close this first hour out with, so we don't have to get into something that we have to continue with the next one?
We're not.
Go ahead, Adam.
Just for the record, I guess I don't know. People always put these disclaimers like we're not doctors, so like don't treat this like prescribed advice.
No, yeah.
Well, I mean, I get so used to red
I felt
pills.
like we should put that in there at some point.
Yeah. I'm just treating this like another red pill, man.
Yeah, man. But at the same time, like, I mean, like from everything I've read and everything we've researched, and for this, and from what I've done personally, and seen personally, the ketogenic diet, it's not. I mean, I don't believe that we need to be doctors to recommend the ketogenic diet, to anybody.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's immoral not to talk about it myself, because we lose 1,600 people a day in this country to cancer. Now, think about heart disease, think about diabetes and hypertension. This is an epidemic, a plague, and we're losing it. And so I'm just talking about, alternative theories. I'm talking about the metabolic theory of cancer. I think it's immoral not to talk about it personally. I get what you're saying. Everyone puts. Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I'm
not a doctor.
It would be immoral to not talk about this because it is the cancer industry itself, and it is an industry. The cancer industry. It's like the Susan Komen, the breast cancer awareness month. It's the whole month of February is breast cancer awareness month. Is there a human being in the United States of America that's not aware of breast cancer at this point? Like that they need to
also
spend
for the record,
amount. Yeah,
that's it predominantly affects Jewish women. That's why there's so
Susan
much.
Komen's a Jew. I know that. I was going to get to that.
Breast cancer is very disproportionately funded compared to other cancers.
Exactly.
I wonder why.
I wonder why. Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a break since I had a joke and you stepped on it. So whatever.
I'm sorry.
No, it was Adam. It wasn't you. It's all right. Do we have a song for this week?
Yeah, isn't it? The boys are back in town.
Yeah. From now, it is the boys are back in town every week from now on. But since we'll get monetized, we're not going to do that one. But we'll play you a song, and it's probably going to be the boys.
I'll sing it
and go listen to the boys are back in town, and then we'll be back.
That's right. Yeah. Well, we'll be back in a minute. right, everybody, we're back, and this is still the Paranormies present the Ahnenerbe Hour. I'm still Johnny Monoxide with Scott Taylor, Adam Haight, and Musonius Rufus. We're talking about the metabolic syndrome. It's metabolic diseases and ways that they are basically cured, right, with this ketogenic diet.
Yeah, like the damage that's caused is cured. See, like the modern diseases of affluence is what kills people in the West. You know, we're talking about heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, hypertension. I think those are the big ones, and then there's a lot of lesser ones, like irritable bowel syndrome. And you know, the question is, how is it that these diseases, this constellation of diseases, what is it that they all have in common? And what they all have in common is metabolic syndrome. This persistent, building up of central adiposity, building up of plaque, in the arteries. The high blood sugar is the number one symptom of it is high blood sugar. Mm-hmm. It was originally called Syndrome X, because it's the underlying condition. And a lot of the diseases, you'll go into one or the other based upon your genetics. Like people who tend to have Alzheimer's tend not to get cancer. It's like, their brain is being turned into Swiss cheese, but they're not getting cancer. But high blood sugar is what they both have in common. Our bodies break in different ways based upon our genes. Some people are going to get this type of cancer. Some people are going to die of heart disease before they get cancer.
Right.
And heart disease is caused by, the buildup of plaque in the arteries, and the plaque is lipoproteins. It's not lipids, fat, right?
Right, lipids are fat, right?
Boomers have the bacon grease theory of heart disease, and we've all heard it. That just like pouring bacon grease down a sink will clog the sink, eating fat will clog your arteries. And they'll actually call them like artery clogging fats. Stay away from them.
Right.
And the war on natural fat has been a part of all our lives, especially if you're a Gen Xer. You've seen it all. You're old enough. I remember McDonald's French fries cooked in beef tallow the way they're supposed to be, and they were wonderful. Mm-hmm. And then they took out the beef tallow, used vegetable oil, and then they created trans fats in order to have the cooking properties of saturated fat, but to avoid the saturated fat, because the vegetarians, were going after all the fast food joints and saying you're killing everybody, with these saturated fats that are in your fryer, saturated fat. So things like trans fats, which are awful, your body doesn't know what to do with them. They're everywhere.
Right.
There's one intervention after another.
Yeah, it's all these interventions, and like with cholesterol issues, the high cholesterol people, well, they give you statin blockers for your cholesterol, and statin blockers take the cholesterol out of your system. And what is your brain made out of? Fat, and it's a computer made out of cholesterol, basically.
Right.
Yeah, and you're putting these statin blockers in your system, and you're basically eating holes in your brain.
Yeah. I mean, what's testosterone made out of?
Right.
Fat. I mean, the fat molecule is how you begin. The same thing goes for the lipoprotein that builds up in our hearts. What's going on is that there's micro damage to the blood vessels, and then the plaque is an internal scab meant to cover up the damage while it heals, and it just never heals. So there's different theories about what's causing the underlying cracking of the arteries. That's the problem. The plaque is not, it's a side effect of the disease. The scab gets so big it fills up the artery. Well, what's causing the damage, the oxidative damage to the blood vessels? There's different theories. I mean, some people just concentrate on all the glucose we eat. We are eating bird seed. Birds do well on grass seed, mm-hmm. right? They're designed to eat it. We have substituted. We're putting grass seed in everything. We put it in our gas tanks in the form of ethanol, substituting all these natural foods with some form of grass seed. The grasses are rice, barley, wheat, rye, and maize corn seeds that we're putting in everything. And even our meat. That's why everyone's taking fish oil right now, because they pin up our beef cattle seed. Well, they're not designed to eat grass seed. They're designed to eat grass. And so they end up having all these omega-6 fats. And the human body needs omega-3 and omega-6 in equal proportions. And if it doesn't have omega-3, it just stores the omega-6. It can't use it away. So basically And we can get into the paleo stuff. That's basically what paleos are saying. Paleos are saying that cavemen were apex predators that ate a bunch of meat. They go out on hunting parties, get big animals, megafauna, kill them and bring them back. And, women, gathered leafy greens and whatever starchy roots they could find. And, that's what we're designed to eat. We're not designed to eat grass seed. Grass seed was an emergency food,
Some of the hunter-gatherer tribes in, I think, Africa and stuff, their word for hunger or starvation basically translates to when we have to eat plants.
Yeah. Some of these, the paleo, the Neolithic revolution was agriculture. They did it. It started in the Middle East for Westerners. The Aztecs had corn, the Chinese had rice, but we started the whole wheat, barley, rye thing in the Middle East. Because it's designed to lie fallow without rotting, because it's designed to wait through the dry season in the Middle East. So all those grasses come from the Middle East. They don't come from Europe. And they radiated out of Mesopotamia, and with it came civilization, sedentary living in the same spot instead of moving around in tribes of 70 to 150 people consuming all the calories and going on great hunts. So we're originally designed for that tribal living, and we've sat down and started eating a bunch of grass seed. You can tell in the fossil record right away that we became shorter. We lost our teeth, and we started getting arterial plaque. One of the great things about mummies is that we can do CAT scans on them, and we can see that they have all the problems we have, and they're eating the diet the doctors tell us that we should eat. It's lots of carbs, mostly plant-based, with a little bit of meat. That's what ancient Egyptians ate, and their mummies have the same problems we do. They have calculus on their teeth, in their arteries. And so, and they're shorter. If you look at these Paleolithic people, there were Amerindians, sorry, with an O. Anyway, they went and saw Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was one of the tallest men in the colonies. He was 6'2", and these guys are taller than Thomas Jefferson. And Amerindians, most people think of them as shorter people off of just meat, and they considered plant to be female food. Right. Plants. That's what women eat, is meat. And there are parts of the animal in every Paleolithic culture that women are forbidden to eat, because those are the parts that spoil first. So only the hunting party gets to eat them. Mm-hmm. So, when they gut the animal, they'll eat the intestines, and women are forbidden to eat that.
Well, yeah, all the offal was, it's the same thing with animals, like when the lions kill whatever, they eat all the heart, the liver, all the stuff that's high in iron and all the good stuff, all the good fats and whatever, because most antelope don't have a lot of fat on them. It's the fat's in them. In their internal organs, and that's where these animals get the same thing. And the same thing with the Amerindian hunters as well. The men got the guts, which is where all the good parts are, and the lean muscle was for the women and children. And now we've reversed our diet to where nobody eats that stuff. That's the gross stuff, and we only want to eat the leanest of unless it's marbled Wagyu beef or something, but pretty much. We want lean pork. We want lean chicken. We get that lean protein. Mm-hmm. And that's where.
Yeah, you're exactly.
That's not even the good stuff. I don't know. I think liver tastes so much better than a dried chicken breast.
Oh no, for sure.
Yeah.
No, I'm just being like the American. that typical American.
Oh no, I get
somebody
that.
said at one point that the Americans
Gross.
are the only people in the world that have an ew factor for their diet. When it comes to eating things, we'll eat, and we're also the only place in the world that has rich man steaks and poor man steaks.
Yeah,
we're
we're all screwed up.
Yeah, and that's due to marketing. It's marketing and the food pyramid. I wonder who's behind that.
Yeah, the war on fat, really started in the 1950s with Ansel Keys. He threw out all the data that didn't go with his theory, and his theory was that the more fat you eat, the more plaque builds up in your arteries. And so he threw out the Chileans who didn't eat much fat but had heart disease, and he threw out the Danes, which ate a lot of fat and had low heart disease, and he just threw out all the ones that didn't go with his theory, and he was rewarded for it. He got on Time Magazine, Man of the Year, that sort of thing. And when you look at, why did people make this colossal mistake? And the colossal mistake is that it was caused because big ag wanted us to consume the foods that made them the highest profits.
It was the subsidies, like I was saying earlier. It was the grain subsidies. That's why the food pyramid was created with carbohydrates as the base. You build your base of your diet off of breads and grains and cereals.
Yeah, you see like all the
which, as we're finding out, like nowadays, I mean, how many people not that have, I mean, the amount of people that are self-diagnosed with celiac is ridiculous, and the actual number of people that have celiac disease is very small. But people that have might not be an actual gluten intolerance, but they have issues because gluten is a very inflammatory. We should have had Holly on for this one, guys.
Come to think of it,
yeah. But you guys are so stupid. No, I can't believe you're eating that. But what does she call it? The glutinous Jew. But yeah, no, gluten is bad for you. Bread is bad for you. This stuff is an inflammatory. They're finding out that that these and like the more like we used, my friends and I used to call the sticks and twigs bread, like the super crunchy hippie. It's got all the different grains, and it's like it's basically squirrel food and like whatever. Like that's the the whole grain hardcore. But the problem is your body can't deal with that properly. You don't digest it right, and it doesn't, and you get joint issues, you get all kinds of other problems.
Yeah. All the modern theories of heart disease have nothing to do with the fat in your diet. They have to do with inflammation. There's inflammation in your heart. We don't know exactly what's causing it. One of the main theories is phytotoxins. Every single animal in nature that consumes vegetables will have a particular plant that it's like married to, and it is immune to all the poisons that plant has. But no other animal is. And because that's how plants defend themselves. They can't run away, so they have to have poisons. And phyto is just the Greek word for plant. So these plant poisons are called phytotoxins. And when an animal is eating a plant that it's not designed to eat, those phytotoxins the first thing they attack is that intestinal lining. Irritable bowel syndrome, it starts inflaming the intestinal lining. You start getting blood crossing that barrier. And your immune system in the blood starts interacting with the crap that's in your intestines. It's terrible. It's a terrible disease.
Gut.
Yeah, the gut.
There's another one called leaky gut. I think it's goals get into your bloodstream or something like that, and your body starts having allergic reactions essentially to all sorts of things.
Right. These phytotoxins will be transported by the blood to go destroy other things throughout your body. Over a long period of time, it builds up. And that's why we have chronic inflammation, or at least that's the phytotoxin theory of inflammation, and which inflammation is, the second big symptom of metabolic syndrome. The first is high blood sugar. The second is inflammation. You're inflamed somewhere, or your joints or your bowels. You're inflamed, and that's why anti-inflammatory drugs are so huge. Ibuprofen, aspirin's anti-inflammatory. And Big Pharma wants to create like cocktails of anti-inflammatories they can put us on the rest of our lives, because we'll have to pay for that and pay big ag for our crappy diets.
That's right. It's weird because it seems like all these companies are hand in glove with each other. You got Big Pharma now working with big ag with companies like Monsanto and ADM.
If we want to bring it back to conspiracies, and I wish I could remember. Said it so I could give him credit, but someone basically said if you want to create basically a dumb consumer who's a slug, introduce them to the
introduce them to the what?
The food pyramid.
Oh right, yeah.
The USDA food pyramid.
Yeah, it's the exact ratio they use to fatten cattle.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It's the exact ratio. It's the cattle.
Also, what's another word? Cattle G.
We jokingly call each other Goya.
What is it? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's weird. Oh yeah. We're reaching levels of the Goyim knowing that shouldn't even be possible. Shut it down, Shmooly. Yeah, it's horrible, and we get fed this diet, and it gets promoted on the Talmud Vision. It gets promoted in the media, which we all know is 100% Jewish controlled, whether it's Muscle and Fitness Magazine or Weight Watchers, or I mean, if you look at these diet programs that they put women on in like the 70s and the 80s, you know, and like, holy cow, dude. And look at who has cancer now. It's all these women from the 70s and the 80s that have cancer. It's
You ever look at those diet magazines? It's always some bullshit like one magic fruit to cure everything.
Oh, that's the new like BuzzFeed thing, you know. Yeah, these 5 foods you should never
checkout
eat.
line, go look at them.
I'm usually
like
busy.
Magic that fix fat fucking dumb American clickbait, you know, or whatever you want to call it. Like,
they show that the woman standing there in her old jeans, holding the waist out, or like you can fit 3 more people in the jeans. Yeah,
and it's like, how'd you do this? Oh, I ate a pomegranate.
A pomegranate.
It's never. Oh, I ate fatty meats until I was full and I stopped drinking anything except for water. It's always like.
And I was saying earlier, there's like we're talking about butter and like, you know, in the butter diet. There's a guy who's got a YouTube channel, and it's called his channel is called Butter Will Make Your Pants Fall Off, and it's like a guy who's gone on keto, and I believe he lost like 200 pounds eating butter and lard and fatty meats, and you know, basically a 0 carb, high fat diet. And I can't wait to see the comment section on this episode. By the way, we go from the Jews ruin everything part 1 with, like, you know, to eat butter, faggot. No, but no, I mean, but like, dude, this is a good conspiracy theory. I mean, and it's not a theory. This is a conspiracy fact. Like that the American diet, the Western diet, which has now been spread, because the Europeans didn't have this diet until, you know, recently, but only recently have they been forced fed this shite that we have. I mean, we have, you know, and just think about processed foods and fast foods and like your frozen dinners and that kind of stuff. And like, you know, like imagine, I mean, I haven't eaten any of that kind of crap in years. The occasional, I know some of you guys saw me do the Grand Mac Challenge live on Facebook. That was a one-time thing.
Well, that's different.
Yeah, that's different. Mac. Yeah, this is Grand Mac.
That's for charity.
How often does the Grand Mac come around? All right, I literally now speaking of, okay, now I did the Grand Mac Challenge. I ate 3 Grand Macs and ate 2 McChickens and polished it down with a couple glasses of bourbon. Now, I was literally in a food coma, and not the kind of food coma you get when you go to your grandmother's house for Thanksgiving and you eat all this good home cooked food. It was a weird food coma where I felt like I was on some sort of drugs. Like I literally felt, well, right. I mean, imagine, we have no idea. We really don't know what's in, you know, McDonald's food. We know it's, you know, all beef, but like, is it like a GMO'd beef?
Well,
or like, you know,
yeah, I don't necessarily think GMOs are like, I mean, they're a thing, but I don't,
or whatever. Or I mean, or are we eating the, you know, like they say the missing children?
Well, the GMO thing is Roundup ready. You know, the glycophosphate. They want to be able to spray Roundup everywhere and kill off all the weeds, but have, you know, their plants stay alive. But the plants absorb the Roundup. Right. So, you know, that's another thing in your diet. And that's what makes GMO bad.
And then you've got GMO corn, right? GMO corn.
GMO.
And you've got GMO grass now, and in California, you know, they have all this grass-fed. They're talking about all this grass-fed beef. Well, now they're feeding GMO grass to these cows. So these animals are consuming GMOs and are processing that and turning it into the meat that we are eating. So we don't even know. Nobody's done studies on this stuff, and like, you know, whether it's good for you or it's not good for you. Whether cows that eat Roundup-ready corn, you know, that because, you know, the corn-fed beef, that was a big thing. Oh, that's corn-fed or grain-fed or whatever. You know, the corn-fed was the better beef in the 80s, I believe, or the 90s. I don't remember. But now it's grass-fed. But all these animals are eating GMO themselves and are processing that in their bodies and turning it into the meat that we eat. So we are eating, you know, the GMO Roundup ready stuff, just processed.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk a long time about food conspiracies. I mean, New Coke is a famous conspiracy. I think I talked about it on here before, didn't I? The New Coke conspiracy.
If you did, I don't remember. Do it again.
So
do it again.
Oh yeah, it's just real quick. Back in the 80s, I mean, Coke was originally that sugar Coke that you get in the Latino aisle, right? That's what Coca-Cola was. It had sugar in it, cane sugar. Mm-hmm. And then back in the 80s, they wanted to switch to corn syrup, but they knew everyone, would be able to taste the difference as soon as they did it. So what they invented was New Coke. They put way too much sugar in it to try to turn people off of sugar. It was way too sweet, sickly sweet. And then everyone's like, we want our Coke back. And so they brought Coca-Cola Classic back 2 months later, but it was with corn syrup instead of sugar. And it was so close to it was the original recipe, except it had corn syrup instead of sugar. And everyone's like, man, I'm glad we got Coke Classic now. That's what they called it, Coca-Cola Classic.
I remember.
Well, it was all a scheme to get people onto corn syrup Coke instead of and forget what sugar Coke tasted like.
Yeah, and that's why
but it didn't happen outside.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Like the corn syrup thing, the corn subsidies, like there's corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup and everything. And corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup is as addictive as a lot of drugs. And it's in everything. And another thing, like another food conspiracy is like, why is soy lecithin in everything? It's like, it's literally, I know it's a thickener and whatever, but like it's literally in things that don't require it. It's, if you go to the grocery store, it's hard to find food that doesn't have that soy in it.
Yeah, that's because soy. See, what they're doing is they're looking for the foods to with the highest profit margins to replace the old foods. And you notice that the old foods are inherently more local, right? Vegetables spoil. Meat spoils. What you want is something that you can put on a barge and send it anywhere in the world, like maize corn, right? Well, soy is a complete protein. Just a complete protein. I think amaranth is complete. There aren't many in nature. And so they thought this is our meat substitute. So they've been looking for ways to put soy in everything as a meat substitute because they get higher profit margins off the soy than the meat. That's
definitely.
Well,
because soy is easier to grow than it is to grow cows.
Yeah, well,
and less expensive.
That's the food conspiracies. I mean, we could spend several episodes talking about different food conspiracies. I mean,
the kosher tax.
The kosher tax. No, I have a whole thing. No, I have. Don't bring that. I have a whole.
We're not going to do it.
No, we're not going to do it, but we're going to do it because I have a guy who's going to come on and do it too. I want you to come on for that one too, Misonius. But yeah.
Well,
but okay, so let's go back. Let's backtrack. Let's bring it all the way back around to. I think we left off with what diabetes. And
diabetes.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I'm
that's
Wilford
bad.
Brimley.
Right. I mean, well, and I'll tell you guys. I was telling you guys during the break, but like that's what got my father was diabetes. My dad had sugar issues. He didn't take care of himself, and that was and diabetes is easily controllable through diet, and
yeah, and it's linked to metabolic syndrome is pretty obvious when you look at metformin. Metformin is a drug for managing diabetes, but it also kills cancer cells. Because cancer lives off of the high blood sugar. Scott just started the ketogenic diet like 2 days ago. I don't think we've talked about that yet.
Oh, we mentioned it a little bit at the beginning, but
yeah,
it was kind of funny. We started talking about all of this stuff like a week or two ago in preparation for this.
I believe your exact words were, as soon as I finish off all the beer in my fridge, I'm going on keto.
I did, yeah, and I finished the beer in my so I was reading about this, and I thought it was so interesting, and the evidence was so convincing that I basically said, fuck it, I'm going to, try this for myself. And I'm on, day 3? Because I did it for, definitely the keto flu thing is definitely real.
Yeah, you're bonking or hitting the wall, as long endurance athletes say. It feels like you're running underwater. You have no energy. Right?
I've been exhausted lately.
Yeah, this is a good segue.
Yeah, I guess so.
No, go on.
I was just gonna say it really hit this morning. I just knocked the can of it over. Oh well, it's empty. I'm not drinking anymore. I just drink, which is.
I think you're breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, what was that?
Am I?
You said you knocked over all your you knocked over the can.
Oh, I had a can of that was empty. I knocked it over. That's all.
Okay. So you're drinking what now?
Yeah.
Just water?
I'm drinking water. Yeah, it's not really fun. I'm not a water guy. I have to drink like apple cider or something like that, but
you can't,
because
because
I can't.
Sugars.
I gotta drink water. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is paleo people talk about this. When you look at animals that are designed to eat plants, right? They have big guts. It's not because they have fat on their guts, like mountain gorillas. Mountain gorillas don't have big fat, on top of their abs. They've got big guts underneath their abs. You see, they have to have lots of guts to digest nutrient sparse plant material.
Mhm.
Well, lions and predators have skinny guts, because getting nutrients out of meat is easy. Well, this is the expensive tissue paradox. We have the most expensive organ in nature, the human brain. I think it burns 600 calories just being a brain every day, not even working.
Well,
And
speak for
The
yourself.
smartest,
Uh-oh.
like chess players and stuff, people that do like competitive stuff with their brain will burn like to the point where they have to supplement their diets.
Yeah, I mean, and they're glucose monsters. And this is one of the things they were telling people in the mid 20th century. It's like, you have to eat glucose for that brain
Mhm.
monster.
Mhm.
And the truth is that when you become keto adapted, which is what Scott is doing right now, he's getting into ketosis, he's becoming keto adapted, and 2/3 of the brain will switch over to ketosis, and it'll live off the ketone bodies. Most of the tissues in the body prefer ketones. Heart muscles are like 30% more efficient when you're in ketosis, right? So a lot of heart arrhythmias go away. You have heart disease and you go into ketosis. But your brain loves glucose. Well, 2/3 of it will switch to ketone bodies. 1/3 of it will remain on glucose, but you can produce all the glucose you need through gluconeogenesis in the liver. And your body just produces enough to feed that brain and to replenish your glycogen stores. We only have like 2 teaspoons of sugar in our blood at any one time. And any more than that's toxic. You got to get rid of it with insulin. But the only place that we can store glucose is in glycogen in our skeletal muscles, and we can only store about 280 grams of it. So endurance athletes, since carb loading began in the 1950s, they've been trying to use gels and sugars to replenish that glycogen when they do these Ironman, super marathoners. They run a marathon, or they run 2 in a day, or they run up to 100 miles a day. These are ultra marathoners.
Ultra marathoners, yeah, that 100 miles, and that's ridiculous.
Yeah, well,
Don't they
new
own a
records
car?
are being set because taken.
I said, don't they own a car? That's what cars are for, okay?
Well, what's funny is that paleo people could do stuff like that. Geronimo ran 90 miles in a day,
Right.
80 miles in a day, and he's just an Indian.
Right.
A lot of great paleo runners that came out of Mexico. The Apache were one of them. But paleo people did stuff like that. It's the persistence running hypothesis. Some people believed it was very important for the hunting party to beat animals by running them to death. You can see this. Hikers do this sometimes, where they'll take a dog and they'll accidentally walk it until it's sick. Because we're really designed. If you had like a goal, like an Olympics of all the animals, man would not win a gold medal in any particular event, but he would do pretty good in long distance running. He would get like, maybe a silver or a bronze, and, so we're actually pretty good at long distance feats. But, moderns, they hit that sugar wall that Scott's going through right now. They bonk. They call it bonking, where you hit the wall. And there's a whole generation of keto athletes who are like, well, why is it that these paleos could run so far and they didn't eat any sugars or gels? They weren't always drinking sugar juice and Gatorade, and all they drank was some water to hydrate, and then they were back to running. Do it. And so these keto adapted athletes are setting records now, and because they realize that glycogen store is like a tiny gas tank that's on a petroleum tanker. If that runs out, the tanker will be on the side of the road, even though it's got all this petroleum in the back, all this gas in the actual tanker that it's not using. The tractor's not using it. So the fat stores are like the tractor trailer full of tanker full of petrol. Unlimited fat stores in your body compared to glycogen. So what if you were just already burning it when you started the race?
Right. You just never run out.
Right. And so they're setting records now. They're unbeatable, these guys, when it comes to long distance stuff. That's we're not talking about something that's going to hurt you. We're talking about like a superior state, a state of health that you haven't been in because you were an American. You were raised on this awful diet. Human beings are supposed to periodically starve and go into ketosis. And eukaryotic non-cancerous cells are flexible and adaptive to burn either glucose or to burn ketone bodies. Cancer cells can only burn glucose. And they could burn glutamine a little bit as emergency, and that's why the ketogenic diet is suppresses all cancers, and some of them it will just cure. The cancers that eat only glucose, it will cure them. But when it comes to some cancers that can switch over to glutamine, that you need some other therapy to punch it out. So that sorry to go back over the metabolic theory of cancer, but
no, that was at the original topic of the show. So I'm like, I'm not sure that we actually finished it out. I think I ended up taking us out into the weeds there, but
yeah. Heart disease, diabetes, what Scott's going through right now, because we're not used to this state, a lot of things are counterintuitive about the keto diet. The first thing that you got to worry about is salt depletion. Carbohydrates signal the kidneys to withhold salt. Clearly why, but there's probably a really good reason, But since you don't, and it's go on, Scott.
I was saying on the keto. Well, on the keto diet, if you're eating, that's the thing is like it's the bacon diet, right? It's because it's high fat. Medium protein, so like you're going to be eating a lot of bacon and fatty pork, which is a lot usually salted. Would that help, or do you actually need to add salt, like add more salt?
You need salt. In fact, they tell people like Dr. Eric Westman that treats diabetics in North Carolina with this diet. He tells them to get bouillon cubes and to sip salty beef or chicken bouillon, in the middle of the day.
Another one,
to get that salt up.
Bone broth.
Yeah, bone broth is.
Seafried was talking. No, it wasn't Seafried. Who was the guy that did the interview?
Christopherson.
Travis
Christopherson.
My kid curescancer.com. That's his website, right?
No, he was the guest on My Kid Cures Cancer.
Okay, yeah, I got that confused. But he's the one they were talking about bone broth, and like bone broth is like magic, basically. And that's because
paleos love it.
And is that because of the salt content and the fat content there?
Mineral content, yeah.
It's basically got everything. There's collagen. There's all sorts of amino acids in it. I mean, bone broth like really good for you.
Now, quick question about bone broth. Is this something you can make this at home, right? Or is this something you like?
Oh yeah, no, you can. Yeah, you can. I mean,
you just boil bones.
I've seen it at the store.
I bought it at the store before.
It comes in. Yeah, it just comes in little boxes. But no, you can get it yourself.
Okay. If you want to do it, like you can buy just the bones for it at the store, but you want to get like a big soup pot.
Yeah.
But you can get for pretty cheap. I have one that's like 12 quarts, I think, at least. It's freaking huge. Mm-hmm. And it does the job pretty well.
Some people get hip bones so they can also eat marrow. That's something else that moderns have not really experienced. Eating that marrow.
I love marrow.
I always bite the like ends of the bones off when I get fried chicken. Does anyone else do that?
It depends on how well it's fried, but I know what you're talking about, Scott. I have done it many times. Yeah. Marrow is now, that's a new, I don't know if you guys go to like gastro pubs or any of these like, hipstery swipple type restaurants, brew pubs or whatnot, where you can get your super expensive, old fashioned cocktail, and you can get like on the menu they'll actually have marrow, or some of these like these dishes that are from way back in the day that we don't eat anymore, and that's where I've had marrow before. They take the bone and they cut it in half, long way, and they just sear. Oh my God, my mouth is watering just thinking about this. Bone marrow is so delicious. If you guys have never had it, I suggest you get it. If you can get a bone saw and cut these, it's usually like I want to say leg bones of a cow or whatever, and you get the middle part where all the marrow is. You cut it in half and you just put it under a broiler with a little bit of salt and pepper, and it is one of the most delicious things you will ever taste in your entire life. and it's full of all the best stuff. I mean, bone marrow, like like when people that have leukemia, they need it's a bone marrow cancer, correct?
Yeah. It was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Blood cancer that starts. Yeah.
Okay, and like your bone marrow, like your marrow is like a very important part of your bone. I'm not like we're not like we said earlier. We're not doctors. I don't even pretend to know anything about like anatomy whatsoever. But I know that the marrow is very important to your body, and it's obviously a source of a lot of nutrition. It creates blood. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's exactly right. Adam's right.
Well, thank you, Adam. I learned something. I love to learn stuff on this show. But I know one thing is bone marrow is delicious, so you should try it.
Yeah, you're going to be eating a lot of fat on the ketogenic diet. It's like 80% fat.
Minimum 65%. Yeah, it's like 5% carbs. Your typical like grocery store magazine keto, because like now all the diet magazines are pushing the keto and the paleo diet because it sells, because there's all these brands of you can buy this paleo this and paleo that and buy this and that and this is keto friendly and whatever. So they're getting in on the marketing of it.
Yeah, there's a spectrum of keto. Like what Seafried would put you on is 80 to 85% fat, and it's reduced caloric because it's limited calories.
And that's the other thing, is it's limited calorie too. It mimics starvation.
That's what.
But it doesn't actually starve you.
Yeah, you can eat ad libitum or as much as you want, but the problem is that you pee out the ketone bodies because your body doesn't like to waste protein or fat, and it will literally start making more glucose in the liver than is needed for your brain in order to spare the other energy. It'll basically, anyway, you don't want to eat too much protein. And you don't want to, if you eat too many calories, it'll start turning that fat into other things, is what I mean to say. So in order to spare them, that's why Seafried does a limited calorie. Now, the magic of the keto diet is that you're eating the most satiating food. You can eat like low-fat stuff all day, and you're on the glycemic roller coaster, right? Like you want to eat again 3 hours later because your blood sugar is bottoming out. You're never quite full. You can eat the whole damn bag of potato chips, in other words, right? You can eat the whole damn bag. But fat fills you up quick. Calories per gram, it hits you like a hammer, and it makes you less hungry. So whereas carbs don't. That's the magic of the diet. You can consume fewer calories and be full. And what's funny about ketosis, another counterintuitive thing is you only want to eat twice a day. I mean, you literally do not want to eat more than twice a day. You don't feel like eating in the middle of the day. You'll eat or whatever your keto meal is of choice in the morning, and then you take your bulletproof coffee or whatever to hit the road. And then around lunchtime, when everyone's hungry, you go for a walk or you do something else. You just don't feel that hungry. Time comes around supper time, then you start feeling hungry again. So you only eat 2 meals a day.
Mm-hmm. And I remember
that's what's typical.
I did keto for a while, and I remember, you're right. Like in the middle of the day, you kind of have to force yourself. I used to have to force myself to finish my lunch. And but come nighttime, like come dinner time, like it's like this weird ravenous hunger that I didn't have, at all during the day. And that was fun. I lost a little bit of weight. I didn't do it properly. But I do want to get back into it again. Because I know it works.
Yeah.
So
there's several misconceptions. One misconception is that it's just a high protein diet, and what I pointed out was protein produces insulin too, right? You want to limit it. You want to get fat. You want to get full. You want to eat fat and get full, and so the fatty meats is what you go for, and that's counterintuitive. A lot of people are thinking, well, I'm going to eat a bunch of fillets or something that's light in fat. It's like, no, son, you better bacon up that sausage. You better butter up that bacon.
Right.
Fat. We want animal fat.
Mm-hmm.
And, so you get that Kerrygold grass-fed butter, and you cook your eggs in it.
Love Kerrygold.
Yeah. Oil, coconut oil is filled with medium-chain triglycerides, excuse me. And back in the 80s, the only thing that was cooked in coconut oil was movie popcorn. And then in the 90s, they had a fatwa on it. They're like, it's saturated fat. It's terrible. And now it's flying off the shelves. Everyone wants it because MCT oil helps stimulate ketosis.
Yeah, that's for your bulletproof coffee.
Yeah, coconut oil is great. I would say if you're gonna eat it, like buy it online in bulk. Don't get the like $9 tiny little jar at Safeway. That's ridiculous. Like you can
get the one from you go to
just as good
Costco.
coconut oil. You get like buckets full.
Yeah, there's the one from Costco. I think it's like $12 or something like that, and it's literally like 4 pounds or 5 pounds of coconut oil.
Yeah, what I find is that it pays to get the stuff that's more virgin. It's like olive oil. You can get crap olive oil, or you can pay a little bit extra and get the good stuff. I really like good coconut oil. But a lot of like lesser brand, like Luann brand coconut oil, it tastes a little waxy to me, or it has a lack of flavor. I really like the virgin coconut oil myself, but that's a weird fad. I mean, it's solid at room temperature, and then it melts at 77 degrees. So it'll melt and turn into a liquid up on your shelf during the summer.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that. Like one day it'll be solid, and then it got hot, and you're like, I'm gonna make my bulletproof. Whoa, it's all melted. What is this? Yeah, you gotta pour it into your coffee. It's good though. I love the coconut oil. People use it for a lot of things. I mean, they use it to brush. Use it to brush your teeth. It's really good for your gums. There's it's got a lot of uses besides just making your keto coffee. I cook with it a lot. I used to make salmon patties cooked in coconut oil. Oh my God, so good.
That sounds good. The medium chain triglycerides are like a substrate to so many different chemicals in your body that when your body, gets them, it just makes the process easier. So some things that you're like deficient in, it'll go ahead and make those real quick. Energy to turn that MCT into other stuff. So, I mean, that's sort of the theory behind MCT oil, why it's so great. Did you know that, you can, I mean, they were using like a coconut water as like a blood plasma, a substitute in World War II. They would literally put coconut water in those guys' veins. But there's something special about coconuts. But anyway, like the ketogenic diet, you're going to consume salt. You don't need vitamin C anymore. You get enough from the meat. You're not going to be deficient in it anymore. You only want to eat twice a day. That's how you know you're in ketosis, because you don't want to eat that middle meal. You don't feel like it. You're just not hungry. You're full. And let's see, what are some of the other counterintuitive things? There's several counterintuitive things that, like, you've been taught all your life to hate salt because salt causes hypertension, high blood pressure. Right. And you're just going to be losing salt. So one of the symptoms of keto flu is you stand up real quick and you feel dizzy. Pressure is getting low.
Scott, go ahead and do that real quick. See what happens.
All right, hang on. No, I feel fine.
Yeah.
I did eat that handful.
He's been eating pure salt.
It was tasty. I got the pink Himalayan salt.
Oh, pink Himalayan salt is delicious. It is.
The meme salt.
Chomping on rocks of salt.
That's right.
People like Dr. Eric Westman, when they get people on the ketogenic diet, they don't want you to miss out on some of those minerals. So usually they'll say eat a cup of greens. They're not talking about starchy vegetables. They're talking about mustard, collard, or turnip greens, or spinach, or Swiss chard. A couple leafy greens, but more fat in them. So you put bacon drippings in it, or lard, or some extra fat, to make it taste good.
I just cooked a whole bunch of kale and bacon fat yesterday. It was so good.
But you can just live off of animal products, and that's so like. Like the greens are the most nutrient dense vegetables, the leafy greens, and it has a lot of minerals in it that you might be, deficient in. So it's not a bad idea if you're trying to do it right, do it that way. But, people like, Vince, you ever hear of Vince Gironda, the great bodybuilder in the 50s? Mm-hmm. He was like the natural bodybuilders, and his diet consisted of steak and eggs twice a day.
That dude had it correct from the beginning.
Yes. He that diet is a little high in protein, but you could easily adapt it. Add more butter. Reduce the total ounces of steak. But anyway, he ate that way so that he could keep his amazing natural physique without having to work too hard. Abs always showed. Because the truth is this, that the reason why we grow adipose tissue or fat tissue is because of a hormone response, and that's the insulin, right? So, literally all animals in nature, if they just ate like a couple extra bites of grass, say, they would start putting on pounds every year, because it's easy to overeat or undereat. weight. What regulates us are those hormones. And eating this grass seed that we weren't designed to eat doesn't fill us full of phytotoxins, which inflame us. But it's always it causes hormonal imbalances. We're always pumping out the insulin. Literally cannot lose weight like that. So that's why these high fat diets work. They satiate you, and you can actually reduce the total number of calories. But the point is, a calorie is not a calorie. Look at the 1 gram of carbs, right? It's got 4 calories in it. You're like, oh, surely that's better than the 1 gram of fat that has 9 calories. Yeah, but that 1 gram of fat does not produce any insulin. It isn't a calorie, is it? It's like saying you can put diesel in a petrol engine. Everything's going to be fine. No, of course there's a difference.
Have you ever heard of this guy? I can't remember his name, but he did what he called the gas station diet. And he went to try to prove calories in, calories out, that calories are calories or whatever. And he limited his diet to whatever the calorie number was to lose weight, because that's how you're supposed to be able to lose weight is have a calorie deficient diet. But he would eat Twinkies and Slim Jims and like whatever it was that you get at a gas station, right? But he was only allowed to eat like 2,500 calories or whatever the number was. And he supposedly lost weight. I don't necessarily buy that story, to be honest. But
well, there's a lot of anecdotal.
I'm saying unless he was eating just Slim Jims, which is like a high fat, medium protein food.
There's a lot of stories about cancer treatments, like carrot juice or cottage cheese with that flaxseed oil added to it. There's a lot of these different cancer treatments where people are like, "Look, I've had good results." And what I would say is that a lot of diets work just because you're on a diet, because you're actually paying attention for the first time in your life. And some of these diets, you might actually go into ketosis, because it's so reduced caloric. You're filling up on leafy greens or something and not getting a lot of calories. Or not getting a lot of carbs, and the carbs you are getting are locked up with fiber. So it's that's why you need scientists to really figure out what's going on, what's the mechanism on a lot of these things. There is a documentary called Fathead, which is about this guy that just eats fast food to lose weight. Way he ends up interviewing these all these different scientists, and they all tell him basically the lipid theory of heart disease is dead, which was news to him. And they're all talking about paleo and high fat and low carb. That's why he called it head. He realized, the human beings need fat. They don't need carbs, though, which is the opposite of what we were told. If you grew up in the 80s, you were told that, the Okinawans live longer because they eat rice fat in their diet, which isn't exactly true. So the opposite of what we were told. Fathead is Tom Naughton is a comedian, so it's fun to watch. And he shows a lot of the lipid theory of heart disease and how it went wrong. And he talks about Ansel Keys, and he talks about a lot of the shenanigans that scientists pulled on heart disease. And the main diet that you would eat like in the 80s, if you really wanted to get healthy, was the Ornish diet. The Ornish diet was this like low fat, high carb or medium carb diet, and it was restricted calorie. And what the Ornish diet was great at doing was making people suicidal. It messed up their hormones so bad. I think even Ornish committed suicide. Don't quote me on that, though, but there were a lot of people that committed suicide on that diet.
One thing I wanted to mention about the whole calorie thing, Dean Ornish is still alive.
Okay, he's still alive. All right.
But one thing with the whole idea that a gram of fat has 9 calories and protein has 4 and so on. The way they measure calories is they basically put the food, whatever, into a little box and they burn it, and they measure the energy expenditure after burning this food. And, they do math. Well, when you eat something, it doesn't go into your stomach's not it's a chemical reaction. It's not a physical reaction. Like, you know what I mean? Like your stomach doesn't burn food. So to say that, fat is more calorically dense, while it may be true, there's also other factors. Like fat doesn't cause an response. So your body doesn't, store it in the same way that it would store sugar. You actually have insulin is the only hormone that a human being has to lower blood sugar. Human beings, however, I can't remember, but human beings have 3 hormones to raise blood sugar. Now, going off of evolutionary theory, nature doesn't like to have a single point of failure for a lot of things. So if you have three hormones that are all designed to raise blood sugar, what that probably means is you're not getting a lot of blood sugar, a lot of sugar in your diet out in the wild as a paleo human, because you need to convert all of these dietary things, all this processed fat, you need that into sugar for your brain to work. And, so I guess what I'm getting at is the idea that naturally need sugar, whatever. It's just absurd if you look at actual hormones that your body produces.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. You're pointing out that the simple fact that we don't have defenses against these diseases of affluence. Like, we don't have really much of a defense against high blood sugar because it wasn't a problem. If you go out in the woods today, where are you going to find sugar? Maybe if the berries are in season at a certain time of year, you'll find some berries, which are like the least, glycemic, hurting begin with. It's hard to find sugar out. And I've already talked about, how our guts, our gut to brain ratio is very small, right? So if we were meant to live off of plants, we would have more guts like mountain gorillas and not skinny guts like lions. We are apex predators is what we are. We're meant to eat animals.
We definitely are.
Yeah.
We've been
Vegans tell you.
Civilized. Yeah, fuck vegans. You ever smell a vegan's kitchen? It's the most disgusting place ever. It's just, when Seafried was talking about working with people with the vegan diet and whatever, he was not lying about the smell. I fucking hate vegans, fucking pussies.
Yeah, he was talking about them chewing all day like cud.
Yeah, and they chew. Yeah, exactly. That was the thing. It's like that's why cows have 4 stomachs. That's why gorillas have large guts. They eat plants, and we're not made to eat plants. That's why Dr. David Duke had to teach us when we were at Charlottesville how many times to chew your broccoli.
How many?
It was a lot. I don't remember. I was getting
at least 800.
I was getting drunk with Mora cow, so it was great. Yeah, by the way, that was great. But yeah, basically, guys, we're meat eaters. We're fat meat and organ meats especially are really, really good for you. They're high in natural fats and all the good vitamins and minerals, the iron and stuff that you need. It's got what your body craves.
Right. It's like Brondo.
It's like, yeah, it's the natural version of Brondo. It's got what your pancreas
right
craves.
It's just like lions, they'll eat the fatty parts of the animal first. It's the opposite of what you think.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and I said that earlier. Yeah. And yeah, the apex, the apex animal, gets the best parts, and then it goes down from there, and then the vultures get to pick the rest of the meat off the bones. But here we are in the United States, with our shitty low-fat diets that people are trying to eat, and now they're just now coming around to these high-fat, paleo, ketogenic, type diets, and they work. They help people out. People are healthier. People are losing weight. People are fixing, I know that my brain functions better on those kind of diets. It's just a fact. It's just a fact.
Yeah, butter helps your brain think better. They did a lot of ethnographic surveys back in the 30s when there were still a lot more Paleolithic people than there are today, or people living that lifestyle. And what they found was these people don't have cavities. They're taller. What causes cavities? It's the sugar you're eating. Mm-hmm. Is in your teeth. You could eat bacon all day and never get a cavity. You'll never get one.
God, if I could totally do that too. There's not a day goes by that I don't want bacon.
A lot of keto people will say, go nuts. Try it out. You mean to tell me I can eat a whole pound of bacon? It's like, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's true.
And then they get sated. They're like, okay, I know what that feels like now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you do want to stop eventually, believe it or not.
Yeah, I mean, your stomach does reach capacity, and it shuts down. Like, that's enough food in me right now. But yeah, you can eat as much bacon or sausages or like any fatty meats, and dip that shit in butter. Make your own mayonnaise. It's egg yolks and oil. And get some good oils. Get yourself some all that good fat, and get in there avocados, all the healthy fats, that are just really good for you, and your fatty fishes, and God, I'm hungry now.
Yeah. The Kerrygold butter is great because it's got omega-3s.
Oh, I love Kerrygold butter.
Taking a spoon of fish oil or a fish oil supplement's not a bad idea either. Because you're depleted in omega-3 fat.
Yes.
If you eat a modern diet, it's all omega 6s that you're eating. And anyway, like a good keto meal would be like eggs and bacon for breakfast. That's a good keto meal because eggs are the perfect keto food.
Mm-hmm.
They're very fatty. And I forgot to say that your blood panel, everything improves except for your cholesterol goes up, and you have to look at your cholesterol very carefully to find out what's going on. Usually your HDL goes up, which is the good cholesterol, and your LDL will stay the same or go down a little bit, maybe. So, people, of course, are always accusing high-fat diets of causing heart disease because they have the bacon grease theory of heart disease. Now, remember, cholesterol isn't a lipid. We were talking about lipoproteins. Your body's making them for a reason. And a lot of these high-fat athletes, the keto-adapted athletes, their HDL's through the roof. So, they're actually, the researchers are actually looking at it as like a superior form of health. Keto people heal faster too. They don't know exactly why all these things are happening. They're trying to figure them out, but it's good. The real limitations of keto are like, well, your brain still needs glucose, so your liver's got to make some. But your heart runs better on the ketone bodies. And you heal faster, and you lose weight. And if you eat unlimited calories of fat, you're not going to lose weight very quickly.
No, but you will.
But if you
lose fat, you will
because your hormones are correct.
Right. Well,
you're not messing up your hormones, so you actually will lose weight. So
well, that's we finished on a pretty good white pill. Eat bacon, guys. Lots of bacon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's anti-Semitic implicitly.
It is implicitly anti-Semitic. That's right. That's right. Eat the bacon and fuck Jews. All right, guys. Anybody got anything in closing? Misonis, thank you very much, bro. It's very informative.
Oh, thanks for. Thanks for letting me blabber away. I mean, I'm just excited about things I researched. So.
Oh no, dude, that was great, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks again for joining us.
Didn't get as much time to research it as I would like to, as I am once again gainfully employed. The Jews can't stop me. But thanks for that, man. Scott, thanks for joining us with your keto flu state as he's crunching down on a giant.
Probably
He's got the salt lick from the deer stand out back.
Salt lick, and I've got like a lamb roast that I've been chomping on.
Is that same lamb roast you took pictures of? That thing looked delicious.
No. This is a second lamb roast.
Oh, those poor baby
they look
sheep
pretty
are
similar,
delicious.
don't worry.
They are delicious. Yeah. You guys got anything you want to add in closing here?
No, I don't think we went into like specific keto diets. But people can look it up and figure it out. I guess I could post some links.
Yeah,
like if you're like a middle-aged.
I'll put them in the send me the links and I'll put them in the description.
I will show if you zero carb. That's what I'm doing. I just eat meat and
say it again. You kind of cut out there a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Zero carb, as in zero carbohydrates.
All right, try that out.
I
Adam,
just eat meat and butter.
It's awesome. Adam, sorry I didn't hear you.
Oh, time travel makes you gay.
Oh man, yeah, and no coiners or fags. That's all I got to say.
Yep.
Yeah,
having no coins makes you gay.
That's pretty much it. Get yourself some coins. Yeah. But anyways, we're gonna finish this off for Scott, Adam, Musonius. I'm Johnny. This has been the show, and we're gonna take you out with a creepypasta. We'll see you later.
When I was growing up, I always thought life was like a video game. I did everything I could to keep up the illusion. Doing homework was like completing a quest. Talking with friends was like navigating branching dialogue trees with NPCs. And making it to the podium at graduation was like killing the final boss. I kept these fantasies to myself, and I didn't think much of them until the details started standing out. Sometimes I'd be walking along a trail in the woods, and my eyes would gravitate towards a tree that looks just a little blurrier than the others. Other times I'd be talking with my parents and the conversation would seem off, as if their responses were just vague enough to make sense if I had said something else. Mrs. Bainbridge gave us way too much homework tonight, I'd argue. Homework is important, son, Dad would say. There's no way I can finish this project on top of baseball practice, I'd yell. Where there's a will, there's a way, Dad would say. I grew skeptical. I started testing the universe to make sure it was real. One by one, the pieces of the puzzle that I thought I had solved became detached. One afternoon, I punched my best friend Aiden straight in the teeth. His face recoiled a bit, but then snapped back into place. His big smile unfazed. "Want to play Smash later?" Aiden said immediately after, grinning from ear to ear. The next day, I tried to get my parents to say my name. "Come down for dinner, honey," Mom called. "How was your day, sport?" Dad asked. "Elbows off the table, dear," Mom said. This went on for the rest of the night. I couldn't remember the last time my parents ever said my name. Looking back on it, I should have just accepted it. It wasn't hard to live my life as the game intended. I could have been happy if I had drowned out all the red flags. It's too late for that now. Yesterday, or at least I think it was yesterday, I decided to push the game to its limits. Right before school, I stole my mom's keys, got in her truck, and drove. It didn't matter where I was going, so long as it was somewhere new. Eventually, the road got less familiar. I was entering the wilderness. In a half hour, I had reached the city limits, beyond the thick canopy of trees that isolated our town from the outside world. Except, there was nothing. The road ended there. The land just stopped. Everything was blue. Up, down, and out into the endless expanse. It was all blue. I stood there on the precipice, wondering what my life had been until that moment. I wondered what it could be. I took my first step into the blue unknown and started to fall. In those final seconds, the scariest thing I could imagine was living a life that someone had chosen for me. But now I'm still falling.